I believe plants have superpowers. This idea did not come about after we opened our shop, the Botany shop. This is why we opened our shop in the first place. So to help you sort of understand why we came to this point, how we got to that point, we have to go way back to the beginning. This is my diving into personal archivism, the one photo I have of my great-grandparents' greenhouse in North Liberty, Indiana. So they were the go-to place for bedding plants, cut flowers, your veggie starts in the spring. And bearing in mind I never met them, but to a degree I feel I sort of inherited a little bit of what we're doing from them, because I've been gardening my entire life. And the stool that I actually have up on the stage with me tonight is a stool from their greenhouse. It lives in our shop. I know. It lives in our shop with us today, sort of as just a nice, gentle, constant reminder that this is where we came from. Again, been gardening my entire life. Here I am in the garage one spring with my dad, planting veggie seeds of some kind. And again, talking about positive influences. Letty, here we go. My dad also loves to tell this story. This is sort of a Polish family tradition. Any Polish people in the room? All right. So tell me also if I'm alone in this, if this is just our weird family. But basically, there's this tradition. When a kid turns 1 year old, you sit them down at a table and put 4 objects in front of them. For me, blindfolded, by the way. The kid has to be blindfolded. For me, it was a rosary, booze, money, and soil. As legend goes, when you take the blindfold off, whichever object the child reaches for first will be their destiny. So it should come as no surprise that I reached for the soil first. Fast forwarding several years, this is somewhere near around the end of undergrad, I was profiled in Organic Gardening magazine and as an emerging leader in American horticulture. No pressure, it's totally fine. But even around that time, I was starting to think of, self-described public horticulture nerd, but starting to think about the importance of growing plants in urban spaces and what that really meant and what that could look like. When we opened our shop in 2021, my parents, again, a little bit of also fun archivism here, saved this little scrap of paper, sort of a what will I be when I grow up response. It is very interesting to be a gardener. I will have a greenhouse and I will make my money from a garden store. I will install sprinkler systems and gardening places. Today we own a plant shop and I collect antique sprinklers, so manifesting, I guess. We're here. So, I was born and grew up in South Bend. I went to grade school downtown, and on my way into school every single morning, we would pass these vacant, decaying buildings in a downtown that you've heard tonight that has really struggled to sort of rediscover and redefine what it wanted to be. I never remember feeling sort of shame or embarrassment about any of this because South Bend was and is home, and so for me, there's a lot of love here. But that's also exactly the reason that we decided to move temporarily in 2015. I remember having a conversation with my partner, and he said, I think if we want to stay here, we need to get out and see what the world could be like, because all we know is South Bend. We have to see what else is possible. And so, with that in mind, we sort of took this big, bold leap into the unknown and moved to Madison, Wisconsin. All of 4 hours away, still in the Midwest, around Chicago, though that was an adventure every time. Madison, Wisconsin, beautiful, wonderful city, the capital of Wisconsin. But there I assumed the role of director of the Allen Centennial Garden, which is the campus university garden for the University of Wisconsin-Madison. When I arrived, this was my first real leadership role. I made it my mission to connect everyone who came through our gates to the world of plants, but especially college students. And what I discovered in this process is that this actually connecting people to plants is in fact a dual mission. Because connecting people to plants also allows people to connect to one another in the process. And probably one of the best examples of what this looks like is a flower crown. Maybe, there we go. So a flower crown, by the way, if you've never seen one, here they are. I'm not putting it on because I'm mic'd and we don't want to risk anything happening. But a flower crown is sort of a beautiful manifestation of this dual mission, because imagine for a moment, and maybe this sounds like you've never had a meaningful experience with plants before. You grew up in a city surrounded by metal and concrete, and to you, plants might feel scary or fragile or something just to be feared or misunderstood. And so when we invite you to make a flower crown, we have all of these materials sitting on a table that are colorful and fragrant. This one is wilted ever so slightly, but it's also ephemeral, and that's also part of the beauty, because you make something in a moment, and by this time the next day, that moment has changed. But that also is one of those superpowers of plants. They remind us of the passage of time. The other part of a flower crown, this other part of the dual mission in that they connect people to one another, I dare you to walk around a public space wearing a flower crown and have someone not talk to you. Because of this, flower crowns have become a staple at every botany event. We had them at Rebel Arts Fest a few weeks ago, and we only use seasonal flowers. So this is not something we do in the winter. This is something we only do during the growing season. But all of that said, come on. How many of you have a dog? Okay. How many of you have ever had the experience of walking along the sidewalk and sort of encountering another person with a dog and striking up a spontaneous conversation with that person? Okay. What you just experienced in that moment is the power of what I call a social object. And flower crowns, by the way, really all plants are social objects. Social objects are mediators. They allow two different people who maybe share absolutely nothing in common to come together and begin a conversation in a safe and comfortable space. Social objects are powerful. So, why do social objects matter? Why do they matter in the context of plants? Well, I believe we desperately need places and opportunities and invitations for us to have conversations with people who are not like us again. And plants can create those places. Okay, so what does all of that have to do with South Bend, the botany shop, what we're doing? Last we checked in, we were up in Wisconsin thinking about dogs and playing with flower crowns. So 2020 happened, as it did for most all of us. And again, at the time we were living in Wisconsin, and it reminded us that we had always intended to return home, that we had been waiting for the perfect moment. I don't know how you define a perfect moment, but we'd been waiting for that moment, for that sign. Well, 2020 seems like a pretty big sign. We'd also been waiting for the perfect job. Again, perfect, I'm using a lot of air quotes here. I don't know how much time you've spent on Indeed looking at urban horticulture leadership in public gardens for South Bend. It's kind of, there's not a whole lot there. But also, aside from our own story, 2020 reminded us collectively, culturally, of two things. The first is that we are all social. We all crave connection and social experiences. Connecting with someone via a Zoom call or FaceTime simply isn't the same as walking up to them in a room like this, having dinner with them, or inviting them over to your house. We are social creatures. The other thing 2020 reminded us is that we all desperately need access to the natural world. How many of you, in the midst of the pandemic, when you weren't really sure what day it was, took a walk outside? What if you didn't have access to an outdoor space? What if you didn't have access to a green space? Then what would you do? So access to plants matters. A piece of data that's sort of stuck with me for a couple of years now is that in 2020, 16 million new people took up gardening for the first time. 16 million. And these may be people who are motivated by thoughts of food scarcity, food and supply chain shortages. We weren't sure what was going to happen, so I'll grow 5 onions in my backyard. That'll solve it. But in 2021, 86% of those people said they felt successful and they were going to do it again. This is momentum. This is moving towards something. So between thinking about plants as important for social objects, not having a job market, and then also, by the way, we all need access to the outdoors, here I was sort of stewing and festering in my parents' upstairs because we moved home with no job and no house, so we lived with my parents very graciously. And then I started to think, well, maybe that just means we have to build whatever it is we want. And so that's when I started to think, what could a public garden that is unique to South Bend look like? Because I don't think it necessarily looks the same as it would in other places. And that drew us to this idea of what we're now calling the Botany block. Now, the Botany block technically is referring to these two spaces right here. If you've been to visit us, the space on the left, of course, is the home of our current indoor plant shop space. On the right is a vacant lot, which you could see in pretty much just about every South Bend neighborhood these days. We chose this space specifically for many reasons, but especially that vacant lot. We looked at a lot of exceptional indoor spaces in town, and I kept saying over and over, but where's the outdoor space? Where's the outdoor space? Because I feel we needed this space and this opportunity to demonstrate, to inspire, and to connect people together, because that, at my core as a public garden nerd, is what we love to do. So our vision for this space is that it become one of the first urban public gardens that embrace this idea of a sort of distributed public garden. So if you think about going to a normal public garden, it's kind of like going to a museum. You drive, you park, you pay an admission, you walk through a series of the rose garden, the herb garden. It's a series of rooms that tell stories. South Bend, though, has a series of rooms which are spread all across the city. Our front yards, our vacant lots, our alleyways, the nooks, the crannies, the crevices, all of the in-between spaces that we haven't quite figured out what to do with, and we'd rather just not think about them because they're either a liability, they're unsightly, or they're an opportunity to create something else further down the line, more tax revenue, etc. I see them, I believe, for what they truly represent, all of those in-between spaces, and that is hope. Because I believe great cities need and deserve public gardens because they reconnect us to one another and because they reconnect us to the natural world at the same time. Public gardens are powerful. So we want to create a garden for South Bend that is unique to South Bend, but is grounded in this principle of community and sociability. So we then decided to start with our community first as we thought through this process. Anybody in the room come to Plant Pride? Okay, well, if you didn't know, Plant Pride was our celebration, our 1-year anniversary of the Botany shop. We invited 2 botanical drag queens to join us. They exist, it's a thing. Miss Lady, the plant lady, and Fertile Liza. Let that sink in. Now, we didn't just invite them because they had cool plant names. They also happen to work in and own plant shops of their own in different areas of the country that look a lot like South Bend. And so we invited them specifically to help the people in the room with us that night envision what a space grounded in plants could look like for our community. So not only did they turn out a fabulous performance, we also had an amazing MC and facilitator, Maylin Plummer, there in the red dress. Maylin is the director of the Idea Center for Public Gardens, and this is a national initiative based at Denver Botanic Garden. The role of the Idea Center is to help public gardens across the country be more inclusive, more welcoming, and more accessible for their communities. So as we wrapped up this evening, we invited everyone who joined us to share what they wish for the Botany block via our wish tree. And so everyone just sort of wrote these little wishes out. And I want to share a few of my favorite wishes with you tonight. A space for conversations between opposing sides, both acknowledging differences and identifying opportunities for compromise. A place for all ages to hang out and talk. A safe place where all humans are equally valued as unique assets to the community. Spaces that inspire strangers to interact. And the last one, somebody looking for a kidney transplant. They left their phone number and their blood type. I'm going to leave this slide up if you want to take a photo, share it to your own social channels in any kind of way, because this, again, is the power of plants to connect us and bring us together in these really unexpected ways. Overall, some really clear themes emerged from that wish tree feedback, themes of safety and belonging and conversation and connection. Certainly spaces to become inspired and to learn along the way as well. But all of them had a common theme, connection. So with that in mind, I want to leave you with a final story tonight, and it's that a few weeks ago, a gentleman came into our store looking to buy a plant for both of his parents. As it turned out, each parent was living in a different assisted living facility, so disconnected from one another, and he wanted this plant to sort of be almost like a botanical tether between the two of them, so that even over time and space, they would have some common bond. He ended up choosing the Hoya rope, which if you're not familiar is a very durable plant, can sometimes have these really cool contorted leaves that can sometimes form the shape of a heart, but also represent the idea of physically being tied together with an actual rope, so that no matter what lies ahead, you never lose connection. We as humans are social creatures. It is probably one reason why we are drawn to social objects in the first place. Again, I believe we desperately need those places where we can have positive experiences with people who are not like us. I believe plants can create those places, which is why I believe we need to make it easier for more people to grow more plants in more places. Plant lovers can and absolutely will save the world. So if you're wondering, what does all of this have to do with a plant store? Why did we open a plant store and not a public garden? Well, that's just it. We are building a public garden. We just started with the gift shop first. Thank you.